Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette. And our special guest today, Michel Rochette, is the president for the Quebec chapter of the Canadian Retail Association. And Matt Coburn is regional director for Quebec for Long McQuade, which is a Canadian music chain. You have 18 stores in Quebec.
That's right.
And we're all here to talk about, no, not music necessarily, but the new provisions in Bill 96 that will affect packaging and signage. So, Michel, let's start with you. This is not new. We knew this was coming. And I know you tried talking to the government provincially and say, look, we need time to adjust. Our retailers need time to adjust. That seems to have fallen on deaf ears.
Yeah, well, the basic problem with the new regulation is that when they unveiled the intention, the Bill 96 itself in 2022, they said that the companies would have at least 3 years to comply with some kind of regulation. But those rules were unveiled 2 years after, so we just lost 2 years of implementation time, leaving us only 11 months to put in place a big scope of changes regarding signage, regarding products themselves, and some other key things in the stores. So we needed time and clarity, and we didn't have time. So that was the main problem. First, we said, and it's the case for any businesses or retailers, we need clarity, we need timeline, a reasonable timeline, and that's what was missing in that case.
What are the more troubling aspects of all of this? If you had to convey to the consumer, what type of things are going to be difficult to deal with? Because as I understand, any product that's made before tomorrow, June 1st, 2025, it's going to be exempt for 2 years. Anything made thereafter is going to be, it has to be pretty much immediate to make a transition.
Yeah, and as you know, for most of the products that you see on shelves, they already, they comply already with regulation. There's already half in French, but the problem was for the exceptional items, the ones that you just have one or two suppliers in the world, or you don't have alternative, or you don't have any French version, and you don't have any other way to have access to those products. Musical instruments and accessories is a good example, but also any kind of hunting gear or collectible items or games or specialized items. So you don't have alternatives.
Washers, dryers.
That's the other part that for the description itself. But just to have access to some products, sometimes you don't have alternatives. So you have two choices. You go in stores or you go online. So now you won't have anymore the right to sell it in stores. So consumer will just have to go online.
Right.
And buy it.
So hurting the retailer that way at the end of the day.
Matt's,
it's like a penalty.
Matt's example is very actually fascinating because we take a more micro approach here, looking at something like guitar strings, for example, available worldwide only with English descriptors. You go to China, you go to France, but here, and this is you sell. It's not a huge percentage of the market for
sure,
but for your stores, it's enough. And that's something like you were offering QR codes or something that people could check for, but that's not good enough. But the fact of the matter is, you can still go to Amazon and get the same product in English with no complaints, which makes no sense.
Yeah, and our entire industry is fully English. Any country you go to, so all of our products, there isn't a French alternative for them, so we are just kind of locked to it. And if we're not able to sell them here in Quebec, the consumers, they'll either go to an American retailer, like American online, like Amazon, or some of the big retailers down over in Ontario, or they can buy them from our website too, but in Quebec isn't going to get the sales for them, and the people in Quebec just don't have access to those products.
And I want to just point out, and I think people need to understand this, it's not that you don't want to comply.
No. Oh, yeah.
Right, that's important, right? This is not about you saying to the government, well, we don't think it's important. No, you've done this in the past, you've done what you had to do. In this case, you're dealing with a supplier from someplace else in the world, and that supplier sells everywhere else in the world, and everywhere else in the world, this is not a consideration. So the question becomes, why would it be a consideration here? What do they tell you when you bring this up?
The market's just too small. They're just not going to make a specific package just for this market when they don't for the others. We own a manufacturing company, Yorkville Sound. We have a number of different products. All of our accessories are bilingual. We have made those changes. We're doing everything we can, but outside of that, if you have, a guitar player that's used the same Martin guitar strings for the last 35 years, they're non-compliant, and Martin isn't going to make a compliant product. So they're just not available in Quebec.
Yeah. Well, to Aaron's point, we should mention Long McQuade has been very active in the franchisation of like products, like like I don't want people to come to the conclusion that you
Sure, we appreciate that.
And that's very important. And also, but like you're talking guitar strings, you're also talking microphones, you're talking amplifiers, you're
You name
talking
it.
a whole range of products.
Maybe it's a shorter list to say what is compliant that you buy now as opposed to what
Very,
isn't,
yeah.
right?
Well, if we continue with guitar strings, if I go to our store on P9 or our store in Laval, there'll be 142 electric and acoustic guitar strings, different SKUs. 6 of them have French on their package, and those are the 6 that we got Godin Guitars, great Quebec company, to produce for us, and they're just a rebranded one of our other companies that they put French on the package. That's it. There's 6 available. Everything else is non-compliant and won't be compliant.
So to your specific industry, and I think we talked about this when we first spoke, you would be willing to go ahead and add on your own if you could. Is
Sure.
it cost prohibitive to then say we'll take every single product that we buy where the manufacturer does not want to comply, and we'll go ahead and put our own label? Would that satisfy anybody, or is that cost prohibitive?
It's cost prohibitive, big time. I mean, their thing is they will allow us if we put a sticker over all the products, but we would have to design that sticker to be an exact replication of that product.
So not just good enough to
every
put the
SKU.
French in. It has
And
to
same
be
size
what it
or
was.
It has to
bigger.
be the wording is mirror image, right? And so we have thousands and thousands and thousands of products. There's no way I could do it. We've been contacted after doing some of these interviews by some printing companies saying, well, we can do it for you with AI. We could design all these. And that's neat, but what's the cost and who's going to pay for it?
Right.
And so all of a sudden then those Martin guitar strings will be more expensive in Quebec. They'll just buy them online
Right.
for the cheaper price. There's no way that we could eat that. I mean, our margins in our industry are so low, most industries couldn't survive in ours.
Is that enough to put you guys like out of business? I mean, eventually, this sort of thing.
We're going to do everything we can to work within the law to try and be as compliant and sell as many compliant products as we can. It could be, but the bigger one is going to be that small retailer, the small music store that's been in business for 40 years that people like to go to, that has 3 employees. If it's prohibitive for us to do it, it's impossible for them to do it. So they're the ones that are going to get hurt long before we are.
So let me ask Michel then, you're dealing with retailers every day. This was a story now, it's been in the news for a while. What are you hearing from them? What's the main consistent argument?
Well, obviously, we're talking to politicians. The first answer is we will be flexible. We won't send policemen in the street tomorrow morning. But the reality is that there are already people in the street complaining, about any kind of English sign that doesn't seem to be translated. So it's very severe. And as you know, it's language in Quebec. It's like religion. You have to be. It's very delicate. You have to comply. That's the point. So the only thing that we have heard that could be useful from the government is that they open the door to some adaptation. So there's probably a new regulation that might be in preparation now, just for a few tweaks, like for the serigraphic, the inscription on the products. But that could solve only a part of the problem, not about the signage, not about the packaging, not about the exception, the one that when you don't have on a series of items, you don't have always alternatives. So, but they want to be seen as flexible, but the reality is up to June 1st, we have a lot of problems, first with signage outside the stores, and for the rest, I mean, there's a lot of detail in the regulation. We talk about products and the signage, but there's a lot of other obligation that will be put in place starting June 1st. So first there's a cost, uncertainty, possible fines, restrictions. So, and losing a French certificate in Quebec, when you are a company in Quebec, you need a French certificate. Otherwise, you cannot sell to any kind of public, schools or a government agency, whatever. So you need that French certificate. So if you don't comply with any part of regulation regarding the language, you can lose your certificate, which causes a lot of other problems to a company. So The issues, their issues are big, and again, it's tomorrow. So
And the fines are prohibitive. I mean, we're talking $3,000 to $30,000 a day.
and we don't have
that doubles as you don't pay it.
Yeah, exactly, and it goes on the daily basis for any products. Each products, we don't have that kind of thing, but it's a huge amount.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the home of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen.
You know, the public is. I got a phone call this week saying, "Does this mean Apple will have to change its sign to pomme?" like with
Les pneus canadiens.
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
right.
But you
no,
know what? Okay, let's go to signs. Now, we're going to put up a graphic here for the audience, but I want you to go through. So this is about a boucherie.
Yeah.
So just go through what's allowed, what's not allowed under this new law.
Well, this is a good example. I mean, because a few years ago, and that ended in 2018. Companies and retailers had to go through change in that matter. I mean, they had to place French and any kind of sign that when your company name is some kind of a description, so you need to have a French counterpart. Now the new regulation says, well, it has to be twice bigger. So in some cases, they were just about to be twice bigger, but not enough. So they have to go back to change the sign or adding things. One of the biggest issue with signage is, as you may know, cities have their own signage regulations. Landlords have their own signage regulations. Malls, they have their own signage regulations. So when you're a retailer and you have to face all those validation, going to the OQLF, the Office québécois de langue française, going through the city, talking to bureaucrats, talking to the landlord, the number of validation that you need to make sure that you have, first, that you can do this, and you have the right, because as you know, most of the time cities and landlords, they don't want to have a couple of words around your name. They just want your logo, your name, that's it. So for companies, it means a lot of changes, problems, validation, and a cost, which is, I mean, because when you do things in a rush, you cannot negotiate. So it costs a lot. So in some cases, the government said that the entire change of the regulation would cost around $7 million to the entire industry. I can say that I know one banner, one company, which, I mean, they will have to pay around $20 million just to adapt their signage. And we're talking about a company that is very well implemented in Quebec since, many decades. So that won't change the people, that won't change the way that we see the company, but they will lose $20 million for a couple of inches more in some cases. So, and they have, in each case, they have to go through each cities, each landlord. So it's a nightmare for a few, and they don't have time to do this.
So in this particular case, for the graphic, for the Best Beef Boucherie, if Boucherie now is larger, twice as large as where it says Best Beef, that's okay.
Yeah, it has to be the entire visible face of your store has to show twice bigger French. Instead compared to English. So in some cases, when your logo took all the place, you have to change it, obviously. In some cases, they say, well, okay, keep your logo, but just get rid of your name and just put, in some cases, you cannot do that. But that was one of the recommendations of the government. Just put out your name. Just take it off or translate or change it. And after that, you have to go through validations and validation before.
So here where it says under Boucherie, because Boucherie is not twice as big as where it says Best Beef, to add a descriptor, though, in French, that's also okay.
Yeah, a description. As long as it's a description, that it's permanent, it's not something that can be movable, you're okay. But it has to be twice bigger, and it has to be, and it's more important, it has to be validated by cities, because the example that we see now on the screen is, in some cases, cannot be validated. Cities will say, no, I don't authorize you to do this. And the landlord will say, no, because all the stores around, I don't permit this, I won't permit it for you. So it's no, just no.
So what happens then?
But that's a good question. What do we do? And that's the question that we always ask government. If we don't have alternative, what do we do? And
Imagine
well,
how many
the answer is the
permits
law
have
is
to
the
be
law.
pulled. The amount of permits that every city in Quebec is going to.
But having a French sign twice the size, French lettering twice the size of English is not new. This is something we've been playing with.
I know before it has to be significantly bigger. That's it. Now they said
yes.
Now there was
that means 12
Unless
twice
you've
bigger.
got a descriptor in French.
And we're not talking about 95% bigger. It has to be 100%
Yes,
bigger.
right.
So it's and they are very strict on this.
So let me ask you
they're
You know that the OQLF will have someone with a tape measure going up to make sure,
it's the
right?
case.
It is, yeah.
So what happens to Foot Locker? Are they allowed to keep that?
No.
No.
No, I mean,
They'll have to
you know-
add. They'll have to add chaussures, right? They'll have to add shoes.
and
But
we-
are
really
they-
big letters.
but,
and just go in some malls. I don't want to name some malls, but I mean Carrefour Laval or even Place Laurier in Quebec. I mean, all those stores, even French-speaking stores, like, I don't want to name, but I mean, New Look is French, it's Quebecer, Case Me is Quebecer. We have a Party Expert. I mean, it seems that Party Expert is too English now. So those companies are Quebec-based company with just English name, and they will have to change their signage, and they're already late.
And I'm guessing there's no government dispensation to help them defray the cost
No.
of having to change this.
No.
No.
So at the end of the day, this goes back to what we said about it drives business to the internet, because if you can't sell in your store, you can still go buy it, and then Quebec loses the business.
Right.
And then secondly, you're now creating new costs for retailers, which means at some point we can't expect them to eat the entire cost, so prices will go up. So we're
right.
basically shooting ourselves in the foot here.
It always affects the price, obviously. I mean, it's no choice.
I'd ask for a simple question like, what's the solution here? But the government is not giving you a delay. I think Bill said, I think Jean-François Robert said he would at the beginning. There's a bit of leeway.
Well, 2
How's that
years
gonna
for
work?
but how do you know when
No, but
guitar
the-
strings are made?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
But when they unveiled the bill, I mean, at that time the rules were not clear. I mean, the
Right.
rules were not. I mean, they unveiled that. I mean, the final version of the rule. I mean, the proposed rule were unveiled at the beginning of 2024, 2 years after, and the final version, which changed, was unveiled only in summer 2024. So we talk about only months.
Yeah.
And the promise, the public promise, was 3 years, and we said at that time, well, that will be short, just okay, but short, and they just forgot us for 2 years.
So your company is Canadian based. You have 18 stores here. What does head office say to you in terms of what are we going to do? How are we going to play this?
Well, we got the okay for the signage. We took care of that early. But when it comes to the products, we're going to sit back and wait and get told to stop selling. Because where our understanding is that it's going to be complaint based. Someone has to complain about a specific product. You're using a mixer right there. Somebody complains about that mixer not having French on it. We'll get a cease and desist order. We have to stop selling. We have 10 days to take it off the shelf. And if we don't, and from what we're told, they'll have secret shoppers coming in. They'll have everything trying to find these products
They
and buy
told
them.
you they will have secret shoppers.
They said they might. So
Inspectors.
more
But,
inspectors,
but on
good
another
good
level,
tax money.
big brands like the Samsungs of this world or whatever. My understanding is for things like washers, dryers, Frigidaires, that they would like, if there is not any kind of French like sign, not just a sticker, but they would like to have these engraved in their machines, and I find that very
That was a request, and they changed their mind. I mean, that was the comparison between the draft regulation and the final version. That part was in. So they said
Yeah.
keyboards, any kind of devices that have an on and off button, even a Windex bottle, with the off and spray,
Sure.
would have become illegal within 2 weeks, by the way, because the regulation said that after the unveiling of the final version, companies will have 2 weeks to comply with. So that was just, you understand, not possible. And they finally changed their mind a few weeks before the final version. So that part disappeared. Great. But the rest is already...
Let
By
me
the way,
ask-
when that came up, this idea about engraving, I believe I had Jean-François Robert on the air, and the argument that he made was, well, companies like Bill mentioned, like Samsung, like big multinationals, who would not do this just to run a production run for Quebec, as you said, not big enough. He said, don't worry, smaller companies will then come in and take that business.
Yeah, sure.
Which, of course,
their
it
hope,
means,
yeah, sure.
again, it would cost more because smaller companies
Right.
don't have the same economies
and they
of
couldn't
scale.
afford to sell like at the
But
same
we don't
rate.
have that kind of manufacturers in Quebec,
No.
neither in Canada.
Well, and if we use the example of guitar strings, we don't sell enough of them.
Right, to
for,
make it-
for me to pitch to anybody to let's go
Right.
start a business building guitar strings.
Michel, let me ask you
It's not gonna
something. In France, what are their rules about all of this?
Good question. There's the law in French called la loi tout bon, who is very strict, but have a very open flex. I mean, let's say that they are way more open than we are, because they exactly said, well, when you don't have alternative, when there's only few suppliers, exactly the case of Long McQuade, they say in this case, no problem. You can sell whatever you have, as long as there's no alternative and you don't have any choices. Do it. So, I mean, they are more permissive
They're
on that
more
part.
accommodating.
Just say, well, if there's no alternative, just do it. So
That's why you can get guitar strings in France that
That's
don't
right.
have French.
And that's kind of where we're doing everything we can to get as many French products. But for these ones that we can't, it's impossible there has to be some sort of leeway for that when there is no alternative. I've endeavored. I will buy every product that comes available in French in Quebec. We put them on our auto order system. Means the second they sell, they automatically get reordered. There's going to be one guitar amp that's coming from Godin Guitars. I've ordered 2 for every location, so that we will have the one amplifier available in the world in French. I'll have it in every single one of the stores, but that's it. There is no
what
other.
you can't get, you can't get.
What I can't get, I can't get.
But you know what's interesting about all of that, whether you're a Franco or an Anglo musician, I know they're very, very set in their ways. They use a certain kind of mic, they use a certain
Very
kind of
much.
amplifier, certain kind of guitar string.
And the slang that goes with it, exactly.
Exactly.
I had
And like they're not going to change one way or another for like linguistic reasons because this is their métier, this is
Yep.
what they do.
I had a fairly famous Quebec musician tell me the other day that he's a keyboard player. If you gave me my keyboard in French, I wouldn't know how to use it. And I wouldn't know where to go.
That's
I
interesting.
couldn't
By
find
the way,
it.
can I just ask? I want to point out this idea of secret shoppers, which is in and of itself kind of ridiculous, but all it takes, my understanding, is if one anonymous complaint comes into
Yes.
the OQLF about something in your store or any other store that doesn't comply, that's reason enough to begin an
So
investigation?
we've had a complaint already. It was a few months ago that came in for a guitar tuner. And what happens is an investigator shows up with a camera and a notepad, and we point them at the product. They take a picture of it, they leave, and then they write up a full report telling us that it's non-compliant and we can no longer sell it. They won't answer, however, that in their picture also takes a picture of 9 other items that are non-compliant. I said, well, do those count? And well, no, we didn't get a complaint on those.
Yeah.
So it is product specific to the complaint. And so that's why things will just start to disappear.
Well, this is how Go Habs Go started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That
And
was
we-
one
and we
complaint.
found out
We said,
today,
well,
but-
we have to.
We found out today, by the way,
Yes.
just how serious that became. It wasn't one, oh, we'll let them know it's not good. It was 6
A
warnings from the OQLF.
9 month or
to the
6
SBA.
month, yeah,
That's terrible.
exactly.
9.
Yeah, yeah.
I would ask, Michel, based on our discussion here, and obviously the government knows this is being discussed, are you still talking to the government? Are you still
Yeah,
optimistic?
we absolutely.
What's the situation?
We always talk to the government. Any kind of problem, we keep an open discussion with them. I mean, and we have discussion, we have meetings, but and again, in discussion, the willingness to be flexible is there, but the problem is on the written regulation, the written law. This is strict, and as we have seen for the QLF, well, they have to enforce the law. So. Again, I mean, the intentions publicly might be interesting, saying, well, we don't want to push anybody of the market, we don't want to send police people, but it is the case anyway. So, I mean, so it's, when you talk to politicians, as always, they talk to citizens, they talk to voters, they don't talk to industries. We talk on behalf of the industry, so it's not exactly the same.
I don't think that anything will change until the New York Times or the London Times does a story on your guitar strings.
Targate?
And like be like a Pizzagate and then all of a sudden they don't like being mocked.
Sure.
And that might help change things, but
Maybe
who
get a whole
knows?
bunch of musicians to get together and let
The
the
minister
government
himself
know, right?
played guitars, so it was pretty, yeah.
We asked him in a meeting, do you play guitar? He said, yes. I said, well, you can't buy guitar strings anymore with your new law.
Well, then that should change everything, I guess, right? Yeah.
Well, we thought of that, but that was a year ago.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Gentlemen, we have to wrap up. I want to thank you both, Michel Rochette.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in
Thanks
as well,
for coming.
Logan.
Or thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah.
And we'll see you again soon on the next episode of the Corner Booth Podcast. Thanks.
Thanks.